Rodrigo awoke with a start. The gentle sway of the bus had lulled him into a deep sleep. He'd been dreaming happily of the ocean, sand, sunshine, and a singing cartoon dolphin when the sudden screeching of the brakes startled him back to consciousness.
You have a lovely speaking voice for a dolphin. Where am I?
Last stop, 120th Street. Everybody off, bellowed the bus driver, who was so clearly ready to be finished with his shift.
What did you say? 120th? I was supposed to get off at 14th Street. The mysterious note said Main Street and 14th.
You didn't get off at 14th Street.
Thank you. What do I do now? How do I get back to 14th Street?
I'd say you need to call a cab or start walking. Either way, it isn't my problem. My shift is over. Rodrigo stepped off the bus before he was pushed off.
I'm going.
Looked around. He definitely wasn't where he needed to be. He looked through his wallet and breathed a small sigh of relief. He had just enough for cab fare, including a modest tip.
For cab fare, including a modest tip. Assuming I can find one right away, I should be able to make my destination at Main and 14th before 5 p.m. As long as nothing else goes wrong and there are no other distractions.
As Rodrigo looked up and down the street, he didn't see a taxi, but he did see a woman. She looked visibly shaken, like she was trying not to cry.
I said no distractions.
Nice try. Get back here, you.
Ma'am, miss, are you all right? Do you need some help?
You know, I was just standing here waiting for my cab, minding my own business and reading my book, when my purse got stolen. You see, there was this man that came up and, you know, he was watching me reading my book and seemed really interested in what I was reading, so naturally I wanted to talk to him about like what I'd found in the book, my favorite chapters, and then he just reached over, grabbed my purse, and ran off. But you know, I should have known that no guy is really going to be that interested in what to expect when you're expecting. But at any rate, I'm supposed to be at my sister's house right now watching my nephew so that she can go to this job interview because she needs this job and she needs me, and if I can't be there, she's going to have to cancel. I can't believe this is happening. I don't have any cash. All my credit cards were in my purse, which now I have to call the companies and cancel them all. And I don't even have my cell phone. The guy took everything.
Rodrigo felt a pivotal moment coming on. He paused, measuring possible outcomes in his head.
Listen, I am so sorry that this happened. Listen, if you'd like me to, I could call your sister for you, let her know you're going to have to cancel because you don't have any money. Could I take your cab?
At that moment, the taxi pulled up. Rodrigo jumped inside, waving a happy goodbye to the woman as she stared after him, shocked.
That wasn't very kind. That's not something that you easily forget.
All right. I'll hit delete, cut down.
All right, let's see what you got. Rodrigo checked his wallet. He had enough for cab fare for one of them. Rodrigo had a choice to make.
Listen, I'm so sorry this happened to you. Listen, I don't have very much, but I probably can get you to your sister's house. Listen, I would be honored if you'd let me pay for the taxi so you can be with your family.
He was getting pretty good at making choices.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, are you sure? I mean, what about you? Don't you have a place to go?
Don't worry about me. I will be fine. Here, look, your cab's here. You be there for your nephew. Your nephew's waiting for you. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. This means a lot, and I won't forget it. Thank you.
Rodrigo smiled as the woman got into the cab and drove away. The money wasn't much, really, but what he'd been able to do with it to make a difference for someone else, well, that was worth much, much more. He would admit he hadn't always made the best decisions when it came to his finances. No one needs a collector's edition life-size stormtrooper.
Are we going to go over that again?
I said no one. But he was happy with this decision.
Though it leaves me in somewhat of a predicament.
Looking up and down the street again, he saw no other people, buses, or cars. Nothing but the lone taxi he had just sent away, but it wasn't moving. It had stopped about 20 yards away. Rodrigo approached the taxi as the window rolled down.
Hey, I forgot to ask, where are you headed?
All the way across town, Main and 14th.
No kidding, my sister lives on 10th. Hop in and we'll drop you off on our way.
Well, that worked out nicely.
Yeah. Don't expect it to always work out like that, just this once. And in a flash, Rodrigo was in the back of a cab, racing downtown towards his next destination.
You're not going to go into labor or anything. I'm kind of on a tight schedule.
Listen to pop culture and you've heard some of these phrases thrown around, you know that the phrase, at least in the world, means you only live once, so kind of eat, drink, be merry, take risks, make the most of this one life, and then when it's over, just go out with a bang. That's kind of the concept of that phrase. And today at Trinity, we want to look at it from a different lens. We don't want to look at it through worldly wisdom, but with godly wisdom. What does godly wisdom say when it comes to living only one life? What does that look like? And so there's this passage in Ephesians, and I love this verse. It's Ephesians 5:15 and 16, that kind of addresses this. It says, "Be very careful then how you live." You only live once, so be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity. Don't live life for yourself. Don't live life just to get a bunch of experiences and then die. Actually, make the most of every opportunity and invest eternally. So today we are talking about wisdom as it applies to a specific topic in our life. We've talked about wisdom in words, wisdom in relationship, wisdom in desires, wisdom in love. Today we want to talk about wisdom and wealth. Wisdom and wealth, wisdom and money. So here's our kind of theme passage for the morning. Check it out. Honor the Lord with your wealth. Somebody say wealth. Wealth is more than money. Wealth is possessions, house, car, things you have. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of your crops, then your barns will be filled to overflowing. Any farmers in the house today? Okay, I'm not in Iowa. That's where I grew up. But we had so many farmers that said, "Oh, I'd love my barn to be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine." How many don't want your vats brimming over with wine? Don't raise your hand. That's a trick question right there. Your vats, Carl, will brim over with new wine, brother, all right? If you do what? Honor the Lord with your wealth. If you read this passage, I think a literal reading would say something like this: if I do the right thing with my money, my possessions, what I've been given, then God will bless me all the time. Wouldn't that be kind of a literal reading? And at this point in the conversation, someone's going to raise their hand and go, "Now, wait a minute, John, you sound like one of those prosperity preachers," right? Because we hear a lot of stuff on the internet and on the airwaves and everything else about, prosperity gospel, that if you do X, God will always give you Y, or whatever the equation is. And so before we talk about wealth, we got to start with some kind of ground rules with how the book of Proverbs is written and how we need to interpret these passages. In a perfect world, yes, I am preaching a prosperity gospel. In a perfect world that's not fallen, the righteous would always prosper, and the unrighteous would always be poor. Because we see this in heaven. This is the heavenly reality. The righteous will inherit heavenly riches. We have an inheritance waiting for us in heaven. And the unrighteous will live in want without the blessings of God. But we live in a fallen world with sin, and so there's these categories we have to unpack, namely the righteous poor, people that live their lives and honor God, and yet they remain poor, at least financially, and then the unrighteous that seem to prosper in our eyes and in the eyes of the world. So unpack that for me, John. What do you mean? Let me just give you like an example to show you what I mean by this. Anyone here ever driven through or grown up on the south side of Chicago? Anyone ever driven through the south side of Chicago? Anybody? Oh, well, congratulations. You all made it alive and you're here today. Amen to that. Because South Chicago it's rough. It's a rough place. I've driven through there. I had some friends that lived there when I went to Wheaton, and man, going to the house was always an adventure. You never knew what was going to happen. There's a lot of violence. Imagine for a moment you grew up on the south side of Chicago in one of the governmental housing projects, and you had a mother and her boyfriend who was your dad, and you grew up in pretty much poverty. You had terrible poverty, but your mom was a strong believer, and she wanted to raise you right, and she wanted to live generously, and so she instilled those values in you. She taught you to tithe, to give back to the church, to invest in others, to take care of family and friends. But at 3 years old, your dad abandoned you, and at the age of 5, you got enrolled in one of the worst school systems in the country. No fault of your own. You didn't mean that. That's just how it happened. And so now you're with your single mom, you're 5, in a terrible school in the country. Your education's terrible through high school. You live in childhood and high school years in poverty, without a father, dealing with a depressed mother who's working 3 part-time jobs to try to make ends meet. So you don't get food on the table. You don't have family dinners. You just scrounge for whatever food you can find. Finally, at 18, determined to live by God's principles, to live generously, to try to give back to your church, to try to grow. You find a job and you work hard at it. It's your first job. It's a manufacturing job in Chicago. Unfortunately, government corruption causes you to lose your job. And while CEOs fleece their pockets, you're left without anything. 6 months later, your younger brother gets shot. Your mom's depressed. You have to go back and live at home. I could go on. You say, why are you telling me this story about the south side of Chicago? Well, I'm saying it because I want you to understand that life is different for different people. So life is not like the game of checkers or chess. We wish it was. We wish that life was like the game of chess, where when we are born, everybody gets the same amount of pieces. And so I've got my 16 pieces and you've got your pieces, and we play chess together, and it truly only has to do with whether you're more intelligent or know the game better than I do. But see, life isn't like that. So when you read the book of Proverbs, you got to understand that Proverbs is addressing a principle that holds true, but holds true in a broken, fallen world where life is not like chess and checkers. Life is more like, and forgive the illustration, but life is more like the game of poker. This is more how life works. Now, I don't know how many of you play poker. Don't raise your hand again, but let's just say that you do and you know the game. You know that in a poker round, you are dealt some cards, right? And some people in life were dealt. Some of you were dealt pocket aces when you were born. You were dealt an incredible hand. Some of you were dealt a 2-7 offsuit, which is like the worst hand in poker. In fact, the next time around, you were dealt a 2-7 offsuit again and again. And some of you were not. And what I mean by that is the game of poker, basically there's a phrase that goes something like this. You can't change the cards you're dealt, just how you play your hand. So see, you can't change the cards that you were dealt in your life, but you can change how you play the hand. And the championship players are the ones that no matter what cards they get dealt, they know how to play enough that over time, they find themselves winning at life, and in that case at poker. So what I mean by that is, folks, Fisher people, Noblesville people, north side of Indy people, a lot of us have been dealt some pretty good hands. Can we just admit that? Many of us were dealt a hand when we were born to a mom and a dad in a middle class or higher household with good education. We were born in a situation where even when we had stumbles and setbacks in life, there was a safety net. We were born in situations, most of us, where there was a safety net of wealth that would allow us to get through, to put a down payment on a house, to help out when we made mistakes, even to get bailed out of jail. Not everyone has that. And I just want you to know as we start, and this has been a really long introduction, but the point of it has been this: as we talk about Proverbs, please understand that these Proverbs, when applied over time, no matter what hands you've been dealt, tend to hold true. But even if you get to the end of your life and you are what's called the righteous poor, and you don't have the wealth that you thought you would, just know you have an inheritance waiting for you in heaven. You have everything to look forward to. And if, for some reason, you are one of those people that was dealt pocket aces in your life, or a great hand, and you just keep getting a good hand, but you don't live according to righteous principles, and you just shove the book of Proverbs off the table, and you say, I'm going to go at it the way I want to live, and you may die having gained the whole world. But guess what? What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and then lose their soul? And you'll be left with nothing. In fact, Proverbs says your wealth will be transferred over to those that live according to his principles. So I just want you to keep that in mind as we dive in. Proverbs is not if I do A, then I get B. It's if I do A long enough over time, the end result of that will be a more blessed life than others. Okay. If you were to look at the 31 chapters in the book of Proverbs and you were to say, John, lay out for me every single verse that deals with wealth, every single verse that deals with finances, I could do that. And I'd lay it all from top to bottom. See every list. The wisest man that ever lived, Solomon, when he talked about wealth, who happened to also be one of the wealthiest men that ever lived at the time, when he talked about wealth in Solomon, every single proverb, hear me out now, falls in one of four categories. You could look at every proverb that deals with wealth and finances and find that it falls in one of four categories. So I didn't make these categories up. The wisest person that ever lived did. So when I share this and we let the Bible just speak, just know these are the four things Solomon thought were most important for people of all times to know when it comes to wealth. All right? Sound good? What I want you to do, because we're going to hit like dozens and dozens of Proverbs, just random fire, bam, 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 bam. I want you to take out a pen right now. And I'm going to ask you on your next steps cards, or if you have note-taking guide or anything like that, I just want you to, as we're flying these verses on the screen, if one of these hits you, captures your heart, causes you to pause, makes you think, I want you to just write the reference down. Just write the reference down, maybe jot yourself a little note, because at the end, I'm going to ask you which of these Proverbs struck home with you. The first category, the first principle when it comes to wealth is this one right here. Make wisdom, not wealth, your top priority. And this is a theme throughout this series. Make wisdom, not wealth, your top priority, because wealth without wisdom will ultimately ruin you. Check this out. Blessed is the man who finds wisdom, the man who gains understanding, for she is more profitable than silver and yields better returns than gold. She is more precious than rubies, and nothing you desire can compare with her. Now let me just say this. Blessed is the man. You're going to hear man, 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 man listed all the time. And so all of the ladies, just relax for just a minute, okay? Because Solomon's addressing, and Proverbs is addressing oftentimes the man. It means people, but where is the woman in this verse? Oh, the woman actually embodies wisdom, okay? She. So just rest easy if I keep saying the man. Ladies, you embody wisdom, evidently. So there's one. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, and then you know how it ends. In all your ways acknowledge him. He'll direct your paths. Wealth is worthless in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death. Make wisdom, not wealth, your top priority. And we've learned through this series that wisdom is not an abstract concept. It's not a Greek philosophy. Wisdom is a person whose name is Jesus. And the deeper we have a relationship with Jesus, the more we pursue him, the more we grow in wisdom, because he models for us what a perfect life should look like. So how should I handle this with wisdom? Well, there's a reason the bracelets, What Would Jesus Do, came out, because it's a wise practice to say, what would Jesus do in this case? I want to pursue him, and the process, pursue wisdom. Do you know how Solomon got his wisdom, by the way? 2 Chronicles 1:7, God comes to him with the offer of a lifetime. God says, ask for whatever you want me to give you, and I'll give it to you. Solomon scratches his head and thinks about it, and in verse 10 he says, give me wisdom and knowledge that I may lead this people, for who is able to govern this great people of yours? Solomon said, I want to desire wisdom. I desire you over everything else. You know what God's response was? Right here. He said, since that's your heart's desire, and because you haven't asked for wealth, first of all, thank you. He didn't say that. But secondly, riches or honor, nor for the death of your enemies. And since you have not asked for a long life, but for wisdom, therefore, wisdom and knowledge will be given to you. Oh, but that's not all. And I will also give you wealth, riches and honor, such as no king who was before you ever had, and none after you will ever have. Because Solomon, you got your priorities straight. You sought me. You sought wisdom. You sought a relationship. You sought something deeper. And because of that, I'm telling you, all these other things will be added unto you. So principle one is clear. If you're somebody that's seeking after wealth right now, I just want you to stop and ask yourself, are my priorities mixed up? Because maybe the one thing holding me back right now is I've got some mismatched priorities, and I need to seek Jesus and his will, and all that other stuff is going to follow. Number two. The second principle in Proverbs, which is actually written about more than any other, is this. It's real simple. Hard work will be rewarded. If you want to sleep in and stay up late and eat yourself to sickness and cut corners and show up tired to work and slough off and be lazy, I'm just telling you, Solomon says more often than not, hard work will be rewarded. Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, overseer, ruler, but it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a bandit and scarcity like an armed man. Lazy people are soon poor. Hard workers get rich. Lazy people want much but get little, but those who work hard will prosper. Good planning and hard work leads to prosperity, but hasty shortcuts lead to poverty. Wealth from get-rich-quick schemes quickly disappears. Wealth from hard work grows over time. See, sometimes when we're dealt a really good hand in life, and we get a break, or we get an opportunity, the temptation is to rest, to relax, and to sit on our laurels, so to speak. But here's what this book of Proverbs says. It says, no, you double down. You keep working. You work harder. You go after it. You don't stop. Don't be lazy. And if you have kids, so important to instill in them the same principle. I love this cartoon. There's a teenager laying on the couch, bowl of popcorn in his lap, and the father says, could you at least burn the candle at one end, okay? I mean, we talk about burning the candle at both ends. Can you just at least burn the candle like at one end? Solomon is very clear with this. Hard work will be rewarded. Make stuff up for your kids to do if you can't find anything. I had a friend that said he had to cut down trees and chop up wood and put it in the wood-burning stove, not so much because they didn't have the money for heat, but because he thinks his dad was just teaching him hard work. Maybe that's your strategy, but this is a principle in Scripture. Hard work will be rewarded. The third area in the book of Proverbs that talks about wealth is this: the borrower is servant to the lender. This is all over the book of Proverbs, which is kind of fascinating. You know, of the 4 top categories, this is one of them. Proverbs 22:7, just as the rich rule the poor, so the borrower is servant to the lender. When our national debt is $21 trillion, let me just tell you, we are enslaved to something, someone. We are in slavery right now, and it's not going to end well if that continues. But what about individually? Are you in debt to the degree that it is tying your hands, to the degree that you are enslaved to somebody else? You know, I think about this principle when people come and ask me for money or ask if they could borrow some money, or when we get benevolence and people come through that are poor and they say, hey, man, can I just borrow however much and I'll make sure to pay it back? You know what I always say? Nah, don't pay it back. It's a gift. I'm not going to enslave you to some kind of relationship where I'm holding money over you like that, because this is true. The borrower is servant to the lender. That's not how this relationship's going to work. But some of you have bought into the principles of the world which say, live it up. And if you got to max out your credit cards, max them out. And if you got to live above your means, just extend your credit. And borrow. But I'm here to tell you that principle in Proverbs is very clear. It's one of the 4 top principles Solomon gives us. That's not going to end well for you. Number 4. The fourth and final principle I want to talk to you about today, because again, it's all over Proverbs, is be generous to the poor. If we are seeking Jesus with all of our heart, and we're seeking wisdom more than wealth, and we're asking Him for direction, if we're working hard with the vocation, the calling that God has placed on your life, and you are working diligently and you're doing the things God has asked you to do, pursuing Him, if we're living a lifestyle within our means and we're not maxing out our debt, and we're realizing we have to have a legacy for other people, and we can't do that, we can't be in slavery financially, then what will happen is God will, over time, He will give you increase. But this fourth principle says, when you have that increase, and even when you don't, I want you to be generous to the poor. If a man shuts his ears to the cry of the poor, he too will cry out and not be answered. He who oppresses the poor shows contempt for their maker, but whoever is kind to the needy honors God. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and needy. A person who gets ahead by oppressing the poor or by showering gifts on the rich will end in poverty. If you help the poor, you are lending to the Lord, and he will repay you. Whoever gives to the poor will lack nothing, but those who close their eyes to poverty will be cursed. God is on the side of the righteous, no doubt. But can I tell you that God is also on the side of the poor? I would even go so far as to say God is prejudiced toward the poor. I might even go so far as to say God has favorites, and they are the poor. And say, John, how could you ever say that God has favorites, or that his heart is strangely like drawn to one group of people over the other? Because it's like all over Scripture, because Jesus favors the poor, because Proverbs talks all about the poor, because we're commanded to give to the poor. You know what? I have favorites. I've got 4 kids. They will tell you who my favorite kid is. My favorite kid is always the youngest kid. Have you noticed this? At least in my household, the baby is always favored. So when I had one kid, Natalie. It was all about Natalie, right? And then we had Claire. Oh, look at little Claire. Natalie, go ahead and go play with something, okay? Oh, hey, Claire, how's it going? And then we had Lauren. Oh, little Lauren. Hey, stay away from Lauren. Lauren's a baby. She's my little one, right? And now we have Grace, who at times can be absolutely like on fire, right? I mean, just like, and come here, little Grace. And you know what my other 3 kids say all the time? Like, how come you're not as hard on Grace? How come you're so hard on us? And I think, well, because Grace is that, she's just little, right? I would never use the word favorite, and you know what I'm talking about. But I have a special place in my heart for that little one, little Gracie. And God's the same way with the poor. He knows we live in a fallen world. He knows that there are young men and women that grow up on the south side of Chicago or in third world countries. He sees their plight. He sees with that heavenly perspective the entire world and the resources found within it. And he knows that you all have been given pocket aces and a king and queen and everything else. And he sees the 2 and 7 offsuit and the bad hands that everyone else gets played. And he has a special place in his heart for the poor. And what he asks us to do collectively, those that have been privileged, those that have more than others, he's asked us to do this. He says, you know what? Pursue me, not wealth. If you get caught up in that, trying to keep up with everyone else thing, you're going to lose your soul. I want you to focus on me. And as you build that wealth through wisdom, I want you to understand something. You got to work hard for it. And even as you're given more, I want you to continue to work. I want you to work hard at the calling I've given you in your life. Don't ever stop. Don't rest. Don't just relax. Those of you that are retired, I want to challenge you right now to consider your retirement and think, how can I continue to work hard? Maybe not for financial gain specifically, but perhaps I have another calling, another ministry God's given me. And then he says to those of you, and don't get in that trap where you have to try to, leverage debt and figure all this out and borrow to get a better house and be upwardly mobile. Don't do that. And finally, as you grow in that wealth and that prosperity and God blesses you in an incredible way, I want you to know something. That is not to be spent purely on yourself. That is to be invested in others, and specifically in the poor. I want you to give and be generous to the poor. In a perfect world, it would be neatly divided in righteous that prosper and unrighteous that are in poverty. But in our world, we have 2 other categories. And as the church, the body of Christ, God calls us to lift up the needy and the hurting, to invest where we need to invest. So with that, I want to close with a passage, a final proverb, and I'm going to invite Bailey to come up as we wrap up. This is one I've been thinking about. And I say it because I think that many of us have fallen into that lie. that you only live once, and so you have to invest it in your own prosperity, your own pleasure, your own experiences. And then when you die, well, that's on the next generation. But I read this verse, and man, it's all over in the Bible, but man, it just reinforces it to me. Look what it says, Proverbs 13:22. A good man, a good woman, leaves an inheritance for his children's children. Leaves a legacy. But a sinner's wealth, it's stored up, and when they die, it's given to the righteous. In other words, it goes away. Someone that lives for themselves, they gather and amass all of that wealth, and then when they die, it just kind of like it dissipates, it goes away. But man, a good man pursues wisdom. A good woman goes after Jesus. And a good man and woman, they continue to work hard in their life. They don't stop. They keep going. They don't rest. They know they want to make all they can and gain all they can. They don't get caught up in debt. They don't try to overshoot their lifestyle with all of that. They actually live within their means, and they work hard, and they pursue Jesus. And the reason they do it and the reason they continue to gain is because they want to be a conduit to then bless others. To be a conduit to bless the poor, to bless their children, to bless their grandchildren. So they live their life with a perspective that is so much bigger than this life. You only live once. So impact your children and children's children and poor and those given the 2-7 offsuit hands of life, and bless and lift up and leave a legacy that is bigger than yourself. And man, I love that. So let me just ask you as we close, which of these proverbs stood out to you? What did you need to hear today? Right now, just take that Next Steps card, and I want you to ask yourself, did one of these proverbs resonate with you when you heard it? It was just, that's good. Maybe for you, you say, man, I didn't necessarily write anything down, but yeah, there's one of those 4 categories I needed to hear. Maybe for you, it's, yeah, I've got my eyes so fixated on my business, on my job, on making extra money, on the grind, whatever it is, that I have lost sight of Jesus and perspective, and I have no margin, and I need to get my life back in balance and pursue Him. Maybe that's you. For some of you, can we just be honest? If you were to take inventory of your life, you'd say, you know, I've gotten a little lazy. I've just been kind of in rest mode. And I'm ready to get back in the game. I need to work. I need to work harder. I have a calling. God has created me. I am made for more. There is more in my life that I have to give. I could invest more in more people and help more people and do more things, and I just need to continue to work hard. There's a boundary to it. I get that. You need a Sabbath. But I'm just saying, some of you have gotten a little lazy, and you need to hear that second principle. For some, your number one aim over the next 12 months perhaps is, I need to eliminate some debt. I need to get myself out of slavery to lenders. I need to make lifestyle choices. I need to sell some stuff. And I need to get my life back in order because it's out of whack. And finally, let me just ask you a point-blank question. How much of your yearly budget is to give to the poor? You know, my wife and I, we sponsor a few kids in Burundi, Africa. We tithe faithfully to the church. We give to those that are in need. But honestly, as I was writing this down, I thought, I could do a lot more. I could give more generously. Maybe that's you. Just take a minute. Write down how the Holy Spirit's speaking, and then we're going to close with communion.
We
just want to thank you for watching the sermon online. If God is working in your heart, we would love to hear about it. You can go online, www.encountertrinity.com/nextstepscard. You can fill out information there. Let us know what God is doing in your heart. If you need help with anything, we would love to help. Counseling, we would love to do anything that we can to help you go to that next level spiritually. When you fill this out, it goes to one of our pastors. It is private, and we will take care of that information to the best of our ability. We love you, we care about you, and we want to see God do great things in your life. Have a great day.